You ever see a headline so insane your brain does that little protective shutdown? Like, nope, that's not real. That's a movie. Because this week, the headline was basically, the US struck Venezuela, and Nicolas Maduro, the sitting president, was captured and flown to the United States to face charges. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Donald Trump went on camera and said the US is going to run Venezuela for now, while American oil companies rebuild the country's oil industry and tap the largest proven oil reserves on Earth. Yeah, if you're thinking, that sounds like the plot of a Tom Clancy novel written by a day trader, you're not alone. So tonight, we're doing a full deep dive, not the hot takes, not the memes, not the my cousin's friend's uncle in the CIA stuff. We're going to break down what happened, what's confirmed, what's being argued, and the big question nobody can stop thinking about. Was this really about drugs and justice? Or was this about oil, power, and the world's most expensive piece of land? Let's get into it. First, what we know. Multiple major outlets are reporting that U.S. forces launched strikes inside Venezuela and captured Nicolas Maduro and his wife during a military operation. He was transported to the United States to face charges including terrorism and drug-related crimes. That alone would be one of the most explosive geopolitical moves of the century. But the part that makes people's conspiracy alarms start chirping is what came next. Trump didn't just frame it as law enforcement. He framed it like an ownership change. He said the US would run Venezuela temporarily and bring in American oil companies to rebuild the oil sector. Now, before we go further, let's do what most people don't do. Let's separate three things. Number 1, what happened? Number 2, is it legal? Number 3, what's the real motive? Because those are three different conversations. So let's start with motive. Because the motive is the part that hits the nervous system. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves. Not one of the largest, roughly 303 billion barrels, about 17% of global proven reserves. That's not a fun fact. That's a global power asset. But here's the twist. Venezuela is rich in oil and poor in output. Because most of its crude is extra heavy, thick, expensive to produce, and requires specialized infrastructure. Like a country-sized industrial machine that needs constant maintenance. And over the last several decades, that machine has been falling apart. In the 1970s, Venezuela was pumping around 3.5 million barrels per day. Now it's around 1.1 million barrels per day. Despite sitting on the biggest reserve pile on the planet. So, let's translate that into human language. Venezuela is a locked treasure chest, and whoever gets the key doesn't just get money, they get leverage. Now let's talk history, because history is where motives live. Venezuela's oil sector was nationalized and later, under Hugo Chavez, control tightened even more. The state oil company PDVSA became the center of political power, and foreign companies got squeezed, forced into joint ventures, or pushed out. For the U.S. oil industry, Venezuela turned from strategic supplier next door into unpredictable petro-state that hates us. Then the sanctions era hit. The US ramped up sanctions that made it extremely difficult for Venezuela to access financing and sell oil through normal channels. Output dropped, infrastructure decayed, skilled workers left, corruption ballooned. And here's where the global chessboard appears. When the US stepped back and Venezuela collapsed, China stepped in. For years, China provided massive loans tied to oil shipments, loans for oil deals, where Venezuela pays back debt with crude. So now you've got Venezuela sitting on the biggest reserves on Earth, unable to fully develop them, and increasingly tied into China's orbit. That's the setup. And then the US storms in, captures the leader, and says, "We're running this now." Even if you're not a conspiracy person, you can see why people immediately say, it's oil. But let's do the skeptical thing, because skepticism is how you avoid being manipulated. What is the US claiming as justification? The US position appears to be that Maduro was already under indictment, and the operation was essentially an arrest mission, tied to terrorism and drug trafficking charges. So the administration frames it as law enforcement plus national security. But international law experts are already arguing that this doesn't automatically justify using military force inside a sovereign country. Under the UN Charter, military force is generally legal only in self-defense or with UN Security Council approval, and critics are saying, drug charges aren't self-defense, and there was no UN authorization. So legally, this is a battlefield. The US says, indictment, national interest, enforcement. Critics say, sovereignty violation, unlawful use of force, and yes, the word that keeps showing up, kidnapping. Because when you remove a sitting head of state by force and fly them to another country, that's the word people reach for. So, already, we have a situation where one side is calling it justice, the other side is calling it abduction, and almost everyone agrees this sets a precedent. Now here's where it gets weird. Not weird as in aliens, weird as in the mask slipped. Because most governments, when they do a controversial operation, try to keep the optics clean. They don't usually go on camera and immediately start talking about controlling the country and its resources. And yet, that's basically what happened. So the question isn't just, did they do it? The question is, why were they so comfortable saying the quiet part out loud? Because saying, we're going to run the country, doesn't sound like a police action. It sounds like regime change. And that is why the global reaction matters. You're seeing countries split instantly into two camps. Camp 1, Maduro was a dictator, and this is liberation. Camp 2, this violates international law and opens the door to chaos. And when the world splits like that, it usually means we're looking at a turning point. So, let's walk through the three main theories people are already circulating, and as always, some of these can be true at the same time. Theory 1, it's about oil, the simplest explanation. Venezuela's reserves are unmatched, and if American oil companies can rebuild production, it's not just profit, it's energy power. Energy power means influence over prices, supply, alliances, and who has to beg whom for fuel. If you control a massive supply region, you don't just get money, you get a lever. Now add one more layer. Venezuela's oil industry is decayed. That means anyone who rebuilds it gets to design the future system. And systems are where the real power lives. Contracts, pipelines, shipping routes, refining partnerships, currency settlement. So if this theory is true, then the drugs and democracy framing is the story you tell the public, and the oil plan is the story you tell investors. Theory 2, it's about China. This theory says oil is still central, but the real target is the geopolitical shift. For years, China's been building influence by financing infrastructure and securing commodity flows across the world. Venezuela is one of those nodes. So if the US reasserts control over Venezuela, it's like ripping a strategic asset out of China's hands in the Western Hemisphere. It's not just, we got oil, it's, you don't get oil. And that's a different kind of win. Theory 3. It's about precedent and intimidation. This one's darker. This theory says the US wanted to demonstrate that international norms don't matter when a superpower decides they don't matter. Because if you can strike another country, seize its leader, and then announce you'll run the place, and the world can't meaningfully stop you, you've just redefined what allowed means. And once allowed changes, everyone recalculates. Allies, rivals, neutral countries, oil producers, debt holders, they all start thinking, if this can happen to them, can it happen to us? That fear alone is leverage. Now let's ground this. Venezuela has had political turmoil for decades. Its economy has been collapsing for years. Millions of people have left the country in one of the largest migration crises in the world. And oil has been at the center of everything. Money, sanctions, corruption, and international power games. So the real question is, does this new US intervention improve life for Venezuelans? Because if this becomes, we took the leader, we took the oil system, we took over, but ordinary people don't see food, power, medicine, jobs, and stability, then what you're left with is the oldest story on Earth. A resource-rich nation becomes the board, great powers become the players, and the people become the pieces. And if you're thinking, that sounds dramatic, it should, because it's exactly what happens when geopolitics meets oil. Let's do a quick reality filter checklist, because this is where people get trapped. Number 1, Venezuela's oil is massive, but it's hard to monetize quickly. Heavy crude doesn't turn into instant cash. It requires infrastructure, refining capacity, stability, and time. So even if the US wants to rebuild and extract value, this isn't flip a switch and print money. It's a multi-year industrial rebuild. Number 2. International backlash matters, but enforcement is limited. International law is real, but enforcement often depends on power. So the argument over legality is important, but consequences aren't guaranteed. Number 3. Even if the operation is framed as law enforcement, the optics look like occupation. And optics shape everything. Alliances, retaliation, insurgency risk, market reactions, and domestic politics. This is why analysts keep comparing this to past interventions. When you topple a leader and promise to rebuild, you inherit the mess. And mess has a habit of getting expensive. So, what happens next? Here's the likely path. There will be an international legal argument that goes nowhere fast. There will be a battle inside Venezuela over legitimacy, who is actually in charge, who the military supports, and whether a transitional government emerges. There will be an economic scramble, oil exports, debt obligations, and who has the right to sign new contracts. And there will be a geopolitical response. China, Russia, and regional powers recalculating how aggressive the US is willing to be in the hemisphere. And that right there, that recalculation, might be the biggest outcome of all, because a single event can change how the world prices risk. And when the world prices risk differently, the future changes. So, let's bring it home. Was this about drugs? Maybe partly. Was it about democracy? Maybe partly. Was it about oil? It would be strange if it wasn't, because when the world's largest proven oil reserves sit inside a collapsed state, tied into rival power financing, sitting right next to a superpower, that's not just a country, that's a prize. And the terrifying part isn't even the oil. The terrifying part is the precedent. If leaders can be removed like this, if countries can be run like this, if resources can be reorganized like this, then the rules of the global system aren't rules, they're suggestions, and suggestions only work until someone strong enough ignores them. So tell me what you think. Is this justice? Is this imperialism? Is this strategic containment of China? Or is this the start of a new era where major powers stop pretending? Drop your take in the comments. And if you want more deep dives like this, where we separate the story from the motive, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, because this isn't over, not even close.